in this world of poker, I got to 1,000 hands at the end of 30 days, playing no more than 20 minutes or 30 minutes a day. Okay? So getting to 1,000 hands, getting to 5,000 hands, crucial for pattern recognition. Climbing 1,000 cliffs, crucial for being able to climb Half Dome. Seeing 1,000 ideas and writing them down and struggling with why is Red Bus being successful with a bus reservation system, and grappling with that idea 1,000 times necessary, right? And so waiting for a point in time in the future when you're going to suddenly become an entrepreneur doesn't work. You've got to be today spending 5 minutes every day, or 30 seconds every day, or 1 second every day, saying, really cool idea. I wonder if there's a business there, right? And unless you exercise those muscles, you don't actually get to a risk-free or risk-mitigated entrepreneurial experience. So, ideas come from your world. You need to kind of figure out how to identify gaps, and you need to figure out how to do that every day in your life. You need to have a view of saying, is this a qualified idea? Will it get to the end of the funnel, or is it a dumb idea? Okay? You need to be intellectually honest with yourself about whether you're pursuing something because you like the subject or because there's a real market opportunity. You need clarity around it. And you need to form kind of an end-to-end view of things. This kitchen is part of something. Does the whole thing make sense? Okay? And to be able to do it enough times in a short enough period to kind of build the muscle memory that goes into being, to having kind of a higher success rate. Okay? So ultimately, I think I go back to something I said earlier in the discussion. Entrepreneurism is about imagining the world as you want it to be, but having an impact on the world as it is today around you in a very real way. Okay? So you need both. You need to connect with the current reality and the future possibilities. So thanks so much for your time. Do I have time for questions?
Regarding the marker pen problem, is it a reasonable assumption to make that the manufacturers of these pens are aware that the pen doesn't indicate how much life is left in that, and if there is a method by which you can identify the level of the ink, they would have already done so, and that they are already working on the problem. And this is a case wherein I, as an entrepreneur, unless I'm an inventor in the true sense of the word, it's not a good idea to pursue. And the second small question is, what is a poker website?
So, every successful startup starts amongst the toes of giants, right? There is somebody who ought to be solving the problem and isn't. There are clothes manufacturers that ought to have identified this problem that families have with 6 layers of winter clothing in Helsinki. There is someone who ought to have identified this whiteboard marker problem. And I will tell you that every successful enterprise, or most successful enterprise, start in spite of there being a natural owner of that problem in the marketplace and an incomplete solution of it. And so you will find a lot that just because it ought to be solved is not a reason to disqualify an idea. And so I think, in fact, the number of problems that ought to be solved that aren't is immense. When I started my current company, I had the great fortune of going out and talking to several senior executives who had all been my prior customers, and I asked them open-ended questions about, tell me what keeps you up at night, okay? What keeps you up at night? And they would treat me like a therapist and dump a lot of problems onto me, and out of which I could have started 6 companies, and I started Zyme. Okay? It really, there are a large number of unsolved problems. Poker website, I heartily do not endorse all of you going online and playing poker, but there are lots of poker resources for you to find for you to find online.
Hi. We see a lot of alumnus of IITM who we can correlate with ending up as entrepreneurs in the Silicon Valley or in Bangalore here. So do you see a trend there, as in why is it that most of alumnus are becoming entrepreneurs rather than corporates? Is this a reasonable image assumption that I made?
You know, I don't know. So I don't know statistically what the percentages are. So I don't know whether a higher percentage of IITians end up in entrepreneurial roles than, let's say, percentage of grad students coming out of a Stanford or a. So I don't know. But I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that that a large number of people who kind of have been learned to think creatively about problems find expression when they kind of encounter market problems. It is because, in a sense, being an entrepreneur is, it's sometimes when people ask me, you know, what is it like to be a businessman? I have trouble answering that question because I don't think of myself as a conventional businessman. I think of myself more as an artist. You know, I feel that I've identified blank canvas, and then I'm trying to fill the blank canvas with something interesting that has an impact. And the way I get pleasure out of it is by seeing something kind of take form from nothing to something and have an impact on the world around you. So I suspect perhaps maybe there's something in the water, something in the mess food, plus something in the, you know, in the kind of self-selection of people, you know, in a campus like this that breeds some amount of creative problem solving, and maybe it finds an outlet there, but I wouldn't know.
Your funnel, is it possible to have a more detailed exposition of that?
A more detailed exposition of the funnel. Yeah. So I would say every business school in the world has an extensive program on this concept of innovation and innovation management. Okay, and if you go online and you do a search for innovation management and ideas funnel, books you know, ad nauseum have been written on this topic, right? So I would say lots of resources online. The fundamental concept is how do you progress ideas which are poorly qualified through a set of sequential stages with minimum capital expenditure that allows you to take away risk. Okay? So if you have an idea, can I spend you know, $500,000 to get it to a stage where 6 of the big assumptions I have made about that idea are now removed? Okay? So it's about the elimination of risk through the targeted use of capital and market interaction, right? So I think all of these kind of funnel concepts are really about that, so that you are not ending up making a massive investment on a low probability event, right? And it's about kind of gearing kind of the risk model and the capital model and get enough feedback and enough tests from the market at each stage. So there are kind of concepts of stage gate processes to kind of take an idea out to the market. And I think all these concepts kind of are similar. They're more geared around large enterprises like a Johnson & Johnson or a big Dow Chemicals that are kind of in the business of needing to invent invent the next 5 big products that are going to fuel their growth in 2016, 2017, and to how do you industrialize the idea process? And I think a lot of thought around that. But I'd say for an entrepreneur, it's important not to get caught in the bureaucracy of it, but to think about how do you spend the least amount of energy and the least amount of money to get to a place where I feel lower risk about the assumptions I'm making. Right? That's the thought process that I think from an entrepreneurial perspective that's important.
Sir, I'm still not convinced with the idea of doing something that is good idea, and instead of doing something that you like. It's like doing something you don't like, working for a company where you don't fit. Similar to that, doing something which you don't like. Still not convinced with.
So what is it you're not convinced with? That you should, in fact, I'm just trying to restate what you're saying. So you're saying there's a case to be made, pursue the things you like, as opposed to what?
As opposed to, like, if you are convinced that this is a good idea, and if you are doing something that you like, you can twinkle it and maybe fit it
Yeah.
to be a good idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be a good idea which you don't like.
See, I take maybe a broader view of this. Your experience, and whether it's your experience as a child, your experience in college, your experience having worked for 10 years in a particular domain, understanding supply chains of enterprises, your experience having gone fishing, or your experience in, you have a set of experiences, right? And it is just like an author who writes a book has to draw on their experiences to write a book. So too does an entrepreneur have to draw on his or her experiences in order to create something. So your personal experiences are very important. But what you like and what you're passionate about may be at odds with what works in the market. Okay? So I may be passionate about having more organized traffic and having sidewalks where I can take my dog for a walk. I may be passionate about it. And I may do a lot of good in society by spending the next 10 or 15 years of my life attempting to change that. It may be an important thing to do. But it's important not to confuse that with a successful enterprise. That's all I'm saying. So the idea of passion and what you enjoy should inform but not dominate your selection of something that's going to be viable as an enterprise. I think this is an important thought process, and I really, I think it is not to say abandon your passions and go, right? It is a balanced way to think about it. If your passion is biotech, and if your passion is understanding, genomic markers and kind of developing genomic therapies, and it's what keeps you awake at night, I'm not saying don't pursue it, but don't get trapped in the idea that thought is what's going to make a successful business. What's going to make a successful business is figure out 5 usage gaps and usage trends where you can apply that, and if you can't find those 5, don't pursue it. That's I think what I'm saying. Not to say that you should abandon what's interesting or passionate to you.
To overcome that in your first company, whether it failed or success?
Well, I think my first kind of attempt at structured entrepreneurship was in the late 1980s, attempting to start a software business. And it didn't work. I was unsuccessful. And I can give you 50 reasons why I was unsuccessful. And all of them are dumb reasons. Okay, none of them are particularly sophisticated reasons. Okay, so I think the answer to the question of why didn't it work? Well, I was ahead of my time. I was driven more by my sense of wanting to start a company as opposed to the reality of what it involved. I started it with too little money, and I didn't have the money to withstand a long run. I treated it like a sprint. It should have been a marathon. I could go on. I mean, this is like a, it's an endless list, right? So, but that's okay. I mean, I think the important thing is, do you come out of it and do you synthesize that into the way you think about the world looking forward? I think that's what's important, right? And did I build relationships and knowledge coming out of that? Absolutely. It was an amazing, I would not replace those 4 years of my life for anything. I wouldn't replace it for anything.
Hello. Hi.
Do we have time for a couple more?
Two more questions.
Yeah. Hi. I wanted to ask the connection between the number of hands you play and the final realization of what is a good blueprint. Because you said you need to play the game, as in the idea game, to know at the number of times you will be able to realize which is a good play and which is not. And then you later talked about the blueprint where everyone knows what is the base. If this will work, how do you connect each other? At what stage can you assume as an entrepreneur that whatever you're thinking, because as right now you said your first company you spotted a lot of mistakes, now you feel there were mistakes and the start was different. So where do you see that happening?
Well, so I can promise you my next venture is going to be a failure, right? Just because I think I have learned too much, and I'm going to have biases, and I'm going to have blinders on my thought process and lack of intellectual clarity, and I will confuse making money for having wisdom, right? These are the things that people do. And so all you're trying to do is attempting to see enough that you reduce chances of failure, right? So I don't think there's ever enough, nor do you want infinite amounts of experience before you take a plunge, because I think part of the learning process is to be out there. And so there's some balance between kind of seeing enough, practicing enough, and at some point you need to get out there and do it, because you're going to realize the next layer of things that you don't already know. So I every time I feel like I've attained a certain amount of height, I feel like I'm not yet reached base camp of Everest, right? I mean, I look up and I just see there's more, but that's, I think, the way it should be, isn't it? I mean, it's a learning journey. So I don't know that there's a threshold measure that I can give you. But you mean, does a company that goes from being small to big lose its entrepreneur? I think that's true, isn't it? I think that's statistically true, that small companies, when they become big companies, there are enough. I think there's enough public examples of things that kind of lose their way, and there are also some really interesting examples of how an entrepreneurial CEO has come back in and taken the reins of a company and caused it to regenerate, right? And so I do think. Oh, I think it's a long conversation. So what is it due to? I suspect it has to do with, some of it is about the blunting of the entrepreneurial spirit, but some of it is that the problem of taking a company from $1 billion to $2 billion is a different problem than taking a company from $1 million to $2 million. It's a fundamentally different problem, because you need to institutionalize innovation. You need to institutionalize things that kind of existed previously in the hands of a few. So I do think there are different sorts of challenges. I don't think it's a simple blunting. I think it truly is a different scale of problem, I think. Last one.
You mentioned in your presentation that if an idea fails, you'd rather want it to fail fast. But we do realize that a lot of successful enterprises actually grow in a hockey stick fashion, right? So where do you actually decide that, in terms of the time that you have to make an exit in terms of the idea?
Right. So I think you can predict what my answer is going to be. It depends, right, a little bit. But I'd say the thought process here is that you need to start thinking that what is the most valuable commodity here? What is the most valuable thing when you're starting a company? And the way to think about it, and the way I think about it, the most valuable thing is the years of my life. Okay? So I would like to make sure that enters the equation, where if I don't want to spend the next 10 years of my life pursuing something that's never going to happen, then you need to have a certain amount of intellectual honesty about whether you're reading the signs right in the market. So the most, I think this conversation really is about, are you able to look at an opportunity and say, as much as I want to pursue it, the blueprint doesn't make sense. The kitchen is connected to the bathroom, and this thing is never going to sell. Right? So it really is about forcing that. Okay? And not to have the luxury of unlimited capital and unlimited time, because that's your best friend, is having limited capital and limited time. Because it forces you to think differently about it. I think that's really the shift. I mean, there's no one answer, obviously, to that. Okay?
Let's thank Chandran again for his wonderful talk. And we have a memento. Maybe I can ask his batchmates, Rajgopal and Srikanth. Why don't both of you come up?
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Great job.
Thank you.
So do stay if you want to listen to some music, some entrepreneurial music.
Well,
I guess.
yeah, so, it's definitely not mandatory, and don't use it to judge the rest of this evening harshly, right?